we are trying to overuse the time period, so we will start very soon. So great to have all of you on this webinar. And now, just to give you an update, is that we have done 102 webinars in this series. We have about 13,000 people who are on this knowledge network, and we invite innovators, thought leaders, startups, technology companies, and also a lot of World Bank staff who want to really use these approaches in terms of our own programs and want to introduce these in our programs. And this one we are also doing with our climate team and climate finance team. Chandra is not here, but we are closely collaborating with our climate team and digital team are working together, digital team and also the agriculture team. The three teams are working on this agenda together. So please keep your microphones on mute to prevent any background noise. There will be a Q&A session, and we try to encourage everyone to put questions on the chat. There's a virtual Q&A which happens during the presentation or after the presentation is over, each presentation, and then we will harvest key questions at the end so that we are able to do justice to the participation, virtual participation there. Today, I think I don't have to introduce the topic. We have a great panel here. I think the topic on biochar is also very interesting because we are now started seeing workable models on this topic emerging all over the globe. So I would, without further ado, invite Madhur Jain, CEO of Varaha, a kind of a very promising startup which is developing scalable biochar carbon credits there. So, and then after that, let me just introduce everyone and then we'll go one by one very quickly. We have Olivia. Olivia is there? Altimeter is there? Shweta, or she has not yet joined?
Made it.
Made it. Okay.
Made it, yes.
So I also was thinking I'll never make this one, but it's great that we are all making it. So Olivia Albrecht, CEO from Altimeter, then Rally Hara, Program Manager, Carbon Removal, Google. Then we have Matthias Matzenberger, Head of Global C-Sync, Carbon Standard International. And then we have two discussants, our own Yashika Malik, Climate Change Specialist, and Mythic. I didn't see Mythic. Is Mythic here?
He's here.
Okay, so Mythic is also here. Our Mythic is a climate change specialist with the World Bank team. So without further ado, floor is yours, Madhur.
Okay. So Shweta, is it okay if I share my screen and just get started?
Yeah, go ahead.
Great. Let me know if you can see my screen.
Can you just, yeah, now it's okay, full screen. Yeah, perfect.
Okay, great, excellent. Thanks everyone for joining in and World Bank for providing this opportunity to share more about biochar and more specifically that how smallholder farmers can be a solution to the problem of climate change as well today. And specifically, I'll focus upon Varaha's work in India and more specifically on biochar. So looking forward to this conversation. Just to introduce Varaha, what Varaha does first of all. So Varaha is a climate tech venture which focuses upon carbon removal specifically, and that too from smallholder farms. And so we work with smallholder farmers to implement different interventions which helps remove carbon from the atmosphere and store it for different permanence of times. And so I'm going to also discuss that briefly in the upcoming slides, but the entire focus on how can smallholder farmers be the solution to the problem of climate change, and their farms can help remove carbon at billions of tons per annum over a period of time. In terms of Varaha's traction so far and where exactly we work, so we work across India, Nepal, Bangladesh, and Kenya as of today. We are 130 people in total, spread across multiple nations. We work with close to 1.3 million acres today across these nations, covering more than 100 plus on-ground implementation partners who help us scale to these farmers. And our projects have already helped remove more than 1 million tons of carbon dioxide since starting the company. Again, proving at a decent scale that smallholder farmers can participate in the carbon market while being solution to the problem of climate change. In terms of problem that we are trying to solve realistically, so smallholder agriculture contributes almost 32% of the total global food production. Agriculture in general across the globe also contributes to 32% of the total global greenhouse gas emissions. And then in terms, by creating this emission every annum through agriculture, it leads to climate change. And then in turn, this climate change is hurting the smallholder farmers the most because they are dependent upon rainfall, uniform weather patterns, and they are shifting every single year. And we are witnessing that for the last 3 years in India as well for some of the major cropping systems that we have. And so this is a critical problem that we are trying to solve, that as to how agriculture can become more sustainable overall, reducing the emissions, and so that the impact of agriculture in itself on farmers is much more lesser as compared to what we are witnessing in the recent years. So there are 4 pathways that Varaha works with. So, and each pathway has a different level of permanence of carbon removal which takes place. So the first one is regenerative agriculture, which is how to transform the interventions on the farm itself and do them more sustainably, which allows for the soil to store more carbon. And it also helps increase the fertility, which in turn helps increase the productivity for the farmers. Then when we started to work with farmers at scale, we saw that close to 30% of the farmers have degraded lands which are not suitable for food production. And hence we started to plant fruits and nut trees, which can actually help store carbon while also generating fruits and nuts as an additional income for the farmers, which helps protect these trees over a long period of time because it actually results in an additional income for the farmers. Now, as we started to work with tens of thousands of farmers, we realized that they have so much residue coming from their farms, which usually gets burnt in India. In India, 130 million metric ton of residue is actually burnt on the farms every single year, which is a massive, massive problem for the country for different reasons. And so we started to collect this biomass and started to burn it at high temperatures in the absence of ideally absence of partial oxygen or full oxygen itself, so that it can turn into condensed carbon and a compound which is called biochar, which helps remove carbon for more than 1,000 years in nature. And I'll discuss how do we quantify that analytically as well, and not just in theory. And then at the end, we saw that almost 28% of the farmers that Varaha is working with, because we conduct thousands of soil tests each year, we saw that they have acidic soils, which becomes a yield limiting factor and hence an income limiting factor as well. And India, at the same time, has 40 gigatons of basalt rock powder available within the country. So we started to procure this basalt rock powder, put it into the farms, which in the presence of high rainfall and high temperature helps turn that into carbonates and bicarbonates, which then leaches into the oceans, storing carbon for tens of thousands of years. So these are the 4 different pathways that we work with. They look very distinct from each other, but at the end of the day, it is actually helping the farmers, their farms and productivity. In case of biochar as well, the biochar ultimately goes back to the farmers as a soil amendment. In terms of what we essentially try and solve for, so in very simple terms, we are building an infrastructure which helps connect smallholder farmers to the carbon markets. And how do we do that? So by bringing capital which can help create interventions like biochar on the ground, which requires capital for biomass procurement, for setting up low-tech or high-tech plants. And then on the buyer side, building integrity and data and tech platform, which helps them in a very integrated manner quantify how much carbon has been actually sequestered, and building trust in that market for buyers to actually buy credits coming from smallholder farms. So that's essentially what Varaha solves for while working with smallholder farmers. And to build trust into these carbon credits which are coming out, we also have partnerships across the globe with different institutions. So we work with India's nodal research body called Indian Agricultural Research Institute. We work with IIT Kharagpur as well. On the biochar side, we have a partnership with IIT Bombay, with whom we are conducting continuous emissions monitoring every single day at our sites, which helps us quantify how much emissions are happening or not happening as a result of production. And so on and so forth across different pathways. We have such external research partnerships to help validate the data that we create. And our team come with diversified experience of working in agriculture. Like, we are a young company, we are only 3 years old. But the combined team experience of having worked in agriculture is more than 500 years, which actually allows us to understand the needs and difficulties that the smallholder farmers face, and how to really bring about a behavior change, because it's a lot about behavior change as well, what we are trying to do. And so our experience of having worked with farmers and our combined team experience allows us to do that in a scalable and economic fashion. Now moving to the main topic, which is biochar for today. So I think just for everyone's understanding in simple terms, what is biochar? So any biomass which is burnt in the absence of oxygen, partially or wholly at high temperatures, helps condense the biomass or the carbon present within, and turns it into a compound called biochar. And it contains anywhere between 70 to 80% of fixed carbon, depending on the biomass that you are making use of. And if you put it back into the pulverize it and put it back into the ground, it also helps store more water, increases the nutrient use efficiency, and in turn leading to lower cost of production of food while increasing the yield for the farmers over a period of time. So it's not just a carbon removal method, but also allows for much more sustainable food production with increased income for the farmers as a result of it. What makes these biochar projects unique that we run with the farmers? So I think I've already spoken, it's exclusively focused upon smallholders. India has access to a lot of biomass. As I mentioned before, that we have a mix of both invasive species which the governments are trying to get rid of. Plus we have biomass coming from agricultural production, which is burnt every year in hundreds of millions of tons, which can be used for this purpose. Given we already work with 100,000 farmers across agroforestry and on-crop weathering soil carbon, which means that we have already built very strong relationship with these farmers. And we are able to leverage that to also solve the problem of biomass collection instead of burning, and then creating biochar out of it, which can go in as a soil amendment for the farmers. And then for each of the pathway, and specifically for biochar as well, we have built in-house monitoring, reporting, and verification tools, which can actually track where the biomass is coming from, how the biochar is produced, and what's the end use at the end of the day. I think fundamentally the good thing is that it's not a complicated solution. If you are able to execute well and create a proper value chain, it has simply 3 steps. So the first one is collect biomass at scale, maintain a record of it. Second, have a facility. It could be artisanal, it could be high-tech, which can help pyrolyze the material that you have, the biomass that you're bringing. And then the third is that ensuring that the biomass is going back into the ground. That's how biochar works. So it's extremely simple and nothing complicated about it. It's about sorting out the value chain and the data integrity in the process. On the pyrolysis side, which is the second step involved, Varaha has 3 different models. So the first model is the artisanal kiln, which you see on my screen here. So it's basically a conical kiln, which has been designed by the Ithaca Institute in Europe after several years of experimentation. And then what it does is that once you fill it to the top with biomass, the top layer has access to oxygen, but the bottom layers don't. And so it enters a partial pyrolysis process. Just to build more trust into the system, what we have done is that for part of the quantities or the kilns, we have set up there is a German company called Testo, which provides devices which helps in continuous measurement of how much emissions that are coming out. And in turn, what it does is that we are able to collect data and deduct it from the life cycle analysis as to how much emissions is happening at different moisture, different temperature, and different regions for different biomasses. So we are able to build a huge repository of data as a result of it, and build trust into something which looks extremely difficult to build trust upon. But I think the co-benefits in terms of farmers being able to run these systems are relatively high, And so it makes a lot of sense to make this system also work while looking at the model 2 and 3, which you see on my screen, wherein Varaha sets up individual uh, industrial reactors, which are centralized facilities. And in this case, you bring material to a centralized facility, the reactor pyrolyzes the material, the biochar then in turn goes back to the farmers who are there in the 30-kilometer vicinity. And then the third model is, which also allows us to build it in a much more scalable manner and in a climate meaningful solution manner, is that given Varaha works with more than 100 partners on the ground, we are also able to find synergies with several partners who have access to biomass at centralized location already. And that biomass is either getting decomposed or getting used as a fuel with ashes and carbon dioxide going back into the atmosphere. So what we are able to do is that we are able to replace such facilities with pyrolyzers or pyrogasifiers, which can make use of that biomass already available as captive in that facility itself, turn that into biochar and give it back to the farmers who are located in the vicinity of those areas. So this, I mean, by just operating across these three models, it allows us to build enough control, enough data, and enough monitoring system to actually do this at higher scale. And also, like, it's extremely important that whatever we do is scalable in nature. Otherwise, it's not climate meaningful. So I think whatever we do, the idea is that how do you do it in a manner wherein you're able to build enough trust and build enough scale that you can bring investment into it and scale to millions of tons over a period of time. And the third one is giving away part of the biochar for free to the farmers. And then for part of the biochar, it is mixed with manure to activate the biochar further. And it is then given away at subsidized prices for the farmers in the vicinity or to the intermediaries who can help in larger distribution of this high quality biochar, which is mixed with microbial products back to the farmers as well. And in various regions that we are working in for several crops, such as oil palm plantations for rice, corn, and cotton, these are 4 of the crops in which we have already applied biochar and have gathered data from. And we are also already able to see increase in yield by varying degrees across these systems. And we do plan to publish, once we have multi-year data, we plan to publish all of this data as to with different combination of biochar plus manure, biochar plus enhanced shock weathering across these different treatments. How much yield increase do we see over a period of time, and accordingly make decisions as to what's the best way of putting biochar back into the ground, into the farmer's fields. And then there is a significant investment that we make for quantification of the carbon removal, which is also happening. So 36 of the total full-time staff that we have actually are from the science and tech teams. And so it allows us to collect feedback rapidly from the ground in terms of operations, farmer feedback, partner feedback, and our own staff feedback, and be able to build tools which allows us to quantify and monitor on a regular basis. So for biomass sourcing, we are able to geotag timestamp exactly where the biomass is coming from, how much biomass is collected, and at what price. Secondly, once it comes to the location wherein the biochar is being made, whether it is low-tech solutions such as artisanal or high-tech facilities, for that we either have sensors or photo through which we are able to capture photo for each of the batches which are produced. And in the last 6 months, what we have done is that we have also installed cameras at each of the facilities. So whenever the biochar is being produced, we have a video log of every single batch being produced without any interruptions. In case a camera goes faulty, the site is closed for the day, right? So the idea is that how are you able to capture more and more data to again build confidence in terms of production. And then the third part, which is once the biochar is being transported, we are able to capture data on each of the farms where it is applied. We are able to again geostamp and timestamp the images where it is being applied, so that we are able to build LC analysis as well, that how much transportation actually happened for the biochar and biomass both in coming to the pyrolysis facility. And then I think the best thing is that Like biochar is being called a permanent solution, but how do you validate it? So as per different research papers and now evolving different methodologies as well, and there are two standards which are the most important ones right now in the world today, which is Puro and isometric. So there are two ways in which they recommend analytics running on biochar samples to estimate whether it's permanent or not and how much permanence it actually holds. And so the H by C ratio for biochar to be stable and to be called permanent should be less than 0.7, ideally less than 0.4.
Mother, sorry to interrupt. Can you wind up in 2 minutes?
Okay, sure. And so we've been able to find a H by C ratio of 0.05, which makes it one of the best in the world. And again, random reflectance, which is called that it should be close to 2.5 for it to be permanent. We are able to find it to be close to 4.7 for our samples, which have been tested in European laboratories, showcasing the permanence of the solution as well, not just the scale, but also the permanence over a period of time. And then it leads to several co-benefits in terms of restoration of grassland, prevention of residue burning, and then increasing yields for the farmers over a period of time by utilizing it in the ground. So we have in different areas, we are running different kinds of projects. So in Gujarat, Rajasthan, and Maharashtra, we have artisanal project. We are already making 10,000 tons of this every month, sorry. Then we have industrial facilities in collaboration with our partners, which has already scaled to 9,000 tons in 2025. And then the Varaha-owned facility, which we are setting up as part of the contract that we signed with Google, and creating our own self-powered plant in the state of Gujarat. At this point in time, it's registered through Puro. That will produce over a period of time close to 60,000 tons of carbon dioxide sequestration starting from 2027, these Varaha-owned facilities. And then we don't want it to remain at thousands. Our goal is that by 2030, we should be producing at least 3 million credits, if not more. And I think all the things which are required to get there, which is biomass, land, that is substantially available in the country. As I said, and I'll repeat again, 130 million metric ton residues being burnt every year, and it's public info. And India has access to 400 million acres of agricultural land. So both biomass, technological capacity, staff, talent, skill, money, as well as the farms are available to actually make it a foolproof solution and scale it from India for the smallholder farmers, and then also take these learnings towards other smallholder nation as well and help them overcome these climatic challenges. Thank you so much. I'll take a pause over here.
Thanks a lot, Madhur. I think you've given a primer on biochar. Everything about biochar you wanted to ask and is now available. It's like a technical primer on biochar for a lot of people who may not know biochar. So I would just like to request everyone else to talk about carbon credits also, because it's been advertised as that kind of a webinar. So biochar and then the carbon credits. What are the problems in getting credits? And because it's a very promising technology, has been in vague, but I think this is the first case we are hearing when we are getting business models developed, registries are being made, and it's good to see all the people who are the kind of in this game or are the ecosystem builders are all here. Buyers and Altimeter is here, Google is here. I can see that all the people who work with Varaha are also there today, and it's a good thing to see all the ecosystem supporters and people who without whom the whole cycle will not be completed are here. But Madhur, thanks a lot. I think this really sets the tone extremely well for us in terms of biochar. So I think we have two types of people. Questions are coming. Madhur, start looking at the questions. And they're coming fast and furious. They're asking you all kinds of questions, technical and otherwise. So please respond to as much as you can. My question would be, when you take it from India to Kenya, what has been the major difference there? Just keep that at the back of your mind when we do the Q&A session from my side. Well, I'm curious to see how we can go parallelly in the same scale in Africa, where I am right now, and I'm talking to a lot of governments and a lot of people at this stage, and so it'll be good to see what your experience there is. Okay, let's go to the next presenter now, and I think let's go to Olivia. Olivia is the CEO of Altimeter. You will see her bio appearing in the chat. Olivia, please, over to you.
Wonderful to be able to speak together. I just want to see a thumbs up that you can hear me okay. I had technical issues this morning. Okay, good. Well, delighted to be able to spend some time together. I know Madhur has provided a fantastic overview in terms of the work over at Varaha and Biochar in particular, and the flow through to the entire agricultural system and how that impacts farmers and also all of us and everyone who's a consumer of food, which is everyone on the planet. So I appreciated his kind of overview to see how it all works together. By way of introduction, Artemeter is a carbon investment management firm where we are actively investing into high integrity, high quality carbon project developers like Varaha. We are an investor in Varaha, in addition to a financing partner uh, for project specific activities where there's a significant capex involved with delivering these projects and bringing them to market. So we're actively involved on the financing side of the equation. I know you've got Riley and others who are going to be active on the buying side. But as we think about the whole kind of ecosystem of the marketplace, we have to think about how all the different pieces kind of come together. So what I wanted to do with our time is maybe talk just a little bit from a high level perspective in terms of how do we take Madhur's vision and actualize it, and who are the kind of active participants that are required in our marketplace in order to see the success of the biochar credit marketplace. So I'm going to extend his comments and kind of bring it together for how does the market get built, and see if that spurs some conversations as well. I saw a lot of comments in the questions as he was speaking that were focused on the kind of technical aspects and the project specifics. But then there were also a series of questions that said, well, what does this mean in practice from a marketplace perspective? What is the marketplace that's being created? Is it simply a selling of biochar physical asset back to farmers for use to enhance the agricultural practices of the individual farmers and see crop yield enhancements and other enhancements for the agricultural practices? Or how does this apply to the carbon credit market? So I'm going to take us to how does this apply to the carbon credit market? So all of the intensive work that the farmers and Madhur and the Varaha team ultimately translate into a program around carbon crediting. The carbon crediting process is complex and challenging, as Riley and Madhur and others can attest in terms of the level of rigor and analysis that's required. What's interesting about the biochar market is, as Madhur suggested, the process itself is very, very simple, and it should be a very simple process. I think what we're most excited about in the carbon credit marketplace are not, pie in the sky, crazy new technologies that have never been tried before, but rather amplifying natural processes and helping to accelerate nature find the rebalance in the carbon cycle again. And I believe that biochar does exactly that. Biochar amplifies processes that already exist for the entire, billions of years of existence of planet Earth, and simply amplify and accelerates those. I always marvel at our home country in the United States that one of the reasons that the Midwest is so fertile in terms of the soil, and so abundant in terms of ability to deliver incredible access to agriculture for the United States, is because thousands and thousands of years ago there were enormous wildfires that existed all throughout the Midwest of the United States, which created physical biochar that got reabsorbed into the soil, and that's why we have this fertile ground across the United States for agriculture. It's because these processes were naturally occurring. And actually, there's many civilizations that have utilized this practice over their life cycles, and actually to see this pyrolysis happen in order to reabsorb back into the soil to then generate this incredible fertility in the soil. So just as an example, I think that what we see with biochar is this really cool overlap in the market between kind of a technology and engineered based solution in a certain sense because it's durable. There's kind of an industrial process that's happening, and yet it's just an amplification of natural cycle to rebalance the Earth's natural balance that always happens with carbon dioxide and a biological process. So what we're seeing, I think, from a marketplace is that there's a growing acceptance or growing interest in biochar because of the simplicity of the model and the speed at which carbon credits can frankly be generated. Uh, Many buyers are following the SBTI, Oxford principles, and other kind of visionary standards to buy carbon credits, and the focus is on durable, permanent carbon dioxide removal projects. And biochar is one of those markets where the underlying technology is simple. The analysis around the quality of the biochar asset is complicated. The MRV, the monitoring of the assets can be complicated and technical, but underlying the science is fairly simple. The access to feedstock and the operationalizing activity is really the limiting factor. And as Madhur said, but the attraction in the market to durable CDR is clear. It's growing. Just for frame of reference, the overall retired carbon credit market in the voluntary side in 2024 was about 170 million tons were retired. And you saw that there were 8 million tons of durable CDR that were signed for delivery in the next several years, with the bulk of those contracts being focused on biochar, because I think buyers, number one, recognize the permanence, the durability of this technology, but also recognize the simplicity and the ability for project developers to deliver into those contracts. About 90% of those contracts were signed for biochar delivery. And yet we still see this as a fairly nascent market. Only 350,000 tons of biochar credits were delivered and retired in 2024. So it's a small market, but growing. And we expect this marketplace to continue to grow given the potential to deliver durable CDR assets into the marketplace where investors and partners on the buyer side are continually looking for these type of permanent natural acceleration carbon credits. From a financing perspective, so we've got the program, we've got a team in place. You identify the team that's going to deliver these high quality CDR removals in the biochar space. What we need to see then is the financing of those activities. One of the reasons that biochar, I think, is uniquely positioned to receive financing for these programs and activities is because there's an underlying physical asset that can be used as collateral or otherwise for the investor investing into projects like biochar. So there's a physical asset, whether it's a community-led kind of Kentucky that's a smaller, more modular, and can be brought around to different areas, or if it's a more large-scale industrial process that has a physical asset backing the investment. So I think one of the reasons that you see investors like Artemeter kind of focused on the biochar space and helping accelerate the opportunity is not only because there's demand from folks like Riley at Google, but rather there's a physical underlying asset that we can lend against in a way that's very different than funding into a tree planting exercise in a different part of the world. From there, we can see that there's demand on the other side of the equation from buyers who are looking to line up long-term offtake and those who are looking to buy spot credits in the market when they're delivered from the likes of Varaha. So we see in the biochar space that there's a more clear throughput from project design, farmers, implementation, to financing, to end buyers in a way that I think is a little bit different than what you're seeing in conservation programs and perhaps even other carbon removal projects that are more nature-based in orientation. So I wanted to kind of present that as kind of how does biochar, a little bit different from some of the other carbon projects, how do we take Madhur's incredible work and Varaha's incredible work and translate that through to the carbon credit generation process that generates an asset that will generate a revenue at delivery, and then how do the financing partners flow through into the equation. My last comment, and then I'm going to close out, is one of the other features of the biochar programs that are so unique is that this is not a single asset or single revenue stream business model. A biochar facility can create several different revenue streams to help diversify away from simply generating a carbon credit. In the case of many of the technology solutions like a DAC credit, there are no other revenue streams for a DAC a business. It is simply selling direct air capture carbon credit. Biochar is unique because there are several other assets that can be sold to help diversify Madhur and team's business model, that even if we see a lower price point in biochar carbon credits, which we expect over time, given the potential volume of projects coming online, that there are other revenue streams to help buttress the investment. And I think that creates a very unique circumstance for the biochar programs for financiers to be invested in. So I'm going to pause there. I'm sure we're going to extend the conversation to the next phase of market development, which would be on the buyer side of the equation. But I wanted to give that context for how we think about it from an investment side.
Olivia, thanks a lot. I really appreciate you bringing the whole investment perspective. But major point is that carbon is just one revenue stream. There are multiple revenue. That's why biochar is very unique in terms of a value proposition for farmers who, because carbon credit is always in everything we are looking at. Carbon, if it's only carbon credit, then the success rate is low in all these projects. And so I think that uniqueness about biochar is very unique. And you also brought the investment perspective, gave us the size of the market and what has been achieved and all. And we got a full kind of an overlay picture of what the investment side looks like. And I think we are following the value chain is the biochar producers, and then we're going to the investors, and now we're going to the buyers ultimately. And I think great to have this whole ecosystem here talking about things. So Riley, over to you now. The next one, I think very interesting to see that it's like paradoxical when people know that Google is doing carbon removal. We have had many presentations from Google for many other things in this series, but we never had a presentation on carbon removal. So it's a very unique thing. And I think, so please bring your perspective of why Google went into buying this, and then what are you doing right now? Over to you, Ryan.
Yeah, perfect. More than happy to. And first of all, thanks so much for organizing. This might be the first carbon removal participation from a Google rep, but hopefully it won't be the last. This is an area we're quite excited about, and I'm sure there'll be many more topics to talk about in the future. But hey, everybody, I'm Riley. I am the commercial lead for Google's carbon removal program. So in practice, what that means is that I'm responsible for identifying the most promising carbon removal technologies and then providing the capital required to scale those technologies in a way that helps Google and the planet hit net zero. So the goal today is really to represent the buyer perspective and really to explain why Google is interested in, but very excited about biochar as a carbon removal pathway. So to that end, I'm hoping to run really quickly through 3 topics, and then I'm sure explore much more in the Q&A afterwards. But really we'll be giving an overview of what is Google's approach to carbon removal, how does biochar fit in, and how can we catalyze biochar as a carbon removal solution, and then what else is needed in order to get it there. So to kick off, what is Google's approach to carbon removal in the first place? So the backdrop of our carbon removal program is that Google has a net zero by 2030 goal. So this means that in just a few short years, our aim is to reduce a significant portion of our own emissions and then neutralize what is remaining by supporting best-in-class climate solutions. As I mentioned, though, the purpose is really not just to get Google to net zero, but really to do it in a way that helps the planet get to net zero as well. To this end, we focus really on two main pillars to direct our efforts and determine the types of carbon removal pathways that we find most promising, as well as to identify the specific projects and companies that we think have the best shot at succeeding. So the first pillar that we look at, we talk about certainty of climate impact. So on this side, we really need to be certain that we're removing CO2 from the atmosphere and that we're keeping that CO2 out of the atmosphere for as long as we say that we are. At the same time, we're also looking for pathways and projects that have a significant scale of climate impact. So we need to do things that are more than just a drop in the bucket for the atmosphere. Carbon removal will need to get to billions of tons by year, by mid-century, and that's something like a 1,000,000% increase over what we're doing today. So practically with scale, what we're looking at is pathways and projects that can bring volumes up and brings costs down. So how does biochar fit into this? The reality of the market at the moment is that most carbon removal technologies score really well on either certainty of climate impact or on scale of climate impact, but it's really hard to score highly on both. So to give two examples, direct air capture can be really highly certain. It's a relatively straightforward process to measure the amount of carbon that you pull from the atmosphere and to monitor where and how it's stored underground. But the scale is really challenging in the near term. These are novel technologies. They need to be developed, deployed, and de-risked before they can deliver the hundreds of millions of tons or even billions of tons that are needed for carbon removal in the coming decades. At the other end of the spectrum are approaches like reforestation. Luckily for the planet, nature's direct air capture plant is a plant. It's trees, and they are incredibly efficient at pulling carbon from the atmosphere. And when organized well, reforestation projects can deliver really meaningful volumes of carbon removed in the relatively near term. But at the same time, the certainty of climate impact is comparably a lot harder. So precise measurement of the volumes removed is a challenge, and risks like wildfires or cattle ranching can pose very real threats to how long a tree can keep its carbon out of the atmosphere. So biochar is an exciting opportunity because it's a solution that, from where I sit, falls somewhere in the middle of these two theoretical ends of our theoretical carbon removal portfolio. So it's a widely available technology, and it can deliver relatively high certainty and relatively large scale in the relatively near term. And that makes it a really exciting prospect, not just for Google's carbon removal portfolio, but for technology that can make a dent in climate change. So uncertainty, measuring the amount of carbon removed based on the biomass inputs and the pyrolysis process, are pretty clear and well understood. And there's a lot of scientific basis for doing pretty precise calculations on that front. And then on the storage side, we know that biochar can reliably store the carbon removed for at least centuries, if not longer. And there's a lot of exciting research emerging on that permanence front as well. And on the scale side, there are fairly well documented, it's fairly well documented that there are gigatons of waste biomass available to be used as an input for biochar, rather than releasing that carbon into the atmosphere either through decay of the biomass or through burning it, as Madhur mentioned. And then pyrolysis technologies themselves are established and de-risked in such a way that it provides a fairly clear path, again, in the relatively near term, to both significant volume and low cost. And as Olivia helpfully shared, these are some of the reasons why I think biochar does make up such a large share of the current carbon removal market. But it's also why we expect it to make up a really large share of the future carbon removal required to make a real dent in climate change. So maybe the last point is how do we as Google and then the broader market plan to catalyze biochar so that it can scale, and what else is needed to get there? So for Google, we plan to catalyze biochar really in the same way that we've helped catalyze a number of other industries and solutions. And that's by committing firm capital to promising companies that we think can deliver biochar carbon removal at scale. And to that end, Varaha really is a prime example. So last year, we committed to purchase 100,000 tons of carbon removal from Varaha's industrial biochar projects by 2030. So the goal is that that provides really two things. One, it gives confidence to investors, some of whom are on this panel, to provide additional capital and other types of support to Vraha and other exciting biochar companies to get more projects deployed, to get more carbon removed, and to get more benefits to the communities that are doing the work. But the second thing is that it gives Raha the opportunity to do what they do best, which is to actually go out and implement the projects that have a real impact on people and planet, knowing that if and when they do, Google will pay them for that work and continue to pay them as they continue to scale. Beyond just our agreement with Varaha, though, I spend a lot of my time thinking about the best approach for scaling biochar in the market more broadly, whether that's financing or different types of convenings or how to share learnings, how to get new investments in the market. And on that front, I think that there are, three buckets that I think that we tend to look at when thinking of what else is needed beyond just Google and beyond just offtake agreements. The first one is more funding. So just very simply put, to get this market, this technology in this market off the ground, we need to get dollars out the door to the most promising companies and solutions that are building and delivering the most promising technologies. So last year, Google contracted over 100 million worth of offtake agreements, which by itself feels significant, but it is a water molecule in the drop in the bucket, and it needs to be sufficiently large that it's something like an Olympic-sized pool, right? We're still far from the amount of capital needed to help these technologies scale. And ideally, it's not just corporate buyers like Google that are catalyzing these technologies, but it's groups like the World Bank that are supporting the market with more affordable capital, or it's governments providing grants and subsidies that can help get these technologies off the ground. Corporate buyers, we can get us some of the way there, and we very much plan to, especially in the near term. But billions of tons of carbon removed will need a wide variety of financing support from a wide variety of sectors. And I think that that's where the conversation has to go to get that funding off the sidelines. The second piece, though, is that we just simply need to deploy. So the point of the funding is not to be the end of itself, but it's a means. And the means is that it's meant to give brilliant people like Madhur and the rest of the Varaha team the runway that they need to go out and do the actual thing, to build the technologies and the projects that pull and store CO2 from the atmosphere. Carbon removal is still a relatively young industry, and the path to both higher certainty and higher scale requires us to just go out and do things in the real world and learn from that hard work. Um, for me, though, I'm bullish on this front because I think that we're seeing really fast innovation and learning rates across the market, but especially in biochar. And so that gives me a lot of confidence that these deployments are not only having the near-term impact that they need to have, but that they're actually setting us up for a lasting impact that can achieve our global climate goals. And maybe the last point that I'll make about what else needs to be done, and this might feel a bit squishy, but it's honest, which is the third is that we just need to share what we learn. So I think that, from where I sit in convenings like this, the goal is really to share our progress openly, to be really highly transparent about what is working, what isn't working, what needs to change. So for Google, we do that through things like our advanced market commitments, Frontier and Symbiosis. We do it through events like this. We do it through retrospectives and blog posts. But we also do it directly with companies like Varaha. So in addition to delivering carbon removal via this offtake, Varaha will also work with us and other researchers to more precisely understand and document the climate impact of different feedstocks on carbon removed via biochar. And I think that model of actually situating learning and research and bringing in academics and other institutions into actual commercial deployments is a really exciting way for us to not only deliver something meaningful in the partnership, say, with Varaha and Google, but to do it in such a way where learnings can be shared out, and even more innovative, even more exciting companies and founders can come in our wake and deliver more scale on a faster timeline and still hitting that high certainty. So maybe just to wrap it up, Google sees biochar really as a very promising carbon removal solution. And I think that we're just tremendously excited to continue to support both Varaha, but also the mix of other biochar companies and solutions as they scale over the coming years. So I'll wrap it up to just say thanks World Bank for hosting, and I'm sure there will be some great conversation in the Q&A. So I look forward to hearing your questions.
Thanks a lot, Riley. Give us a good perspective of what are you thinking as a Google and emerging as a major buyer and the industry and all that, and how can we expand? The scale is also and from the World Bank side, we are in the business of scale, and we are trying to ourselves learn what role we can play here. And that's the question. In the end, I'll ask each one of you on what should we be doing in this space. Clearly, we are trying to now raise specific bonds, and maybe there could be a biochar related bond if a lot of people come together, and that opens up a new kind of people who have never financed biochar ever. So it's just it could be a very crazy idea. I'm not saying that we're going to do it tomorrow, but it is that we have to think of both the financing, knowledge, and as you rightly say, the knowledge is shared. Can we get more people coming into this? The risk perception changes, the investors. So building the whole ecosystem for biochar to achieve, if you're talking about 1 million times now, we at least get 10x in a kind of a short period of time. What we need to do that? So I think I'll now come to Matthias Madsenberger, and I think it's a pleasure to have you on the panel. And Matthias, please introduce your organization and also what your perspectives are on this interesting dialogue which has started today.
I leave the stage to my colleague Dominic.
Okay. Is the Dominic the presenter? I have goofed somewhere. I thought I had in my list. What I saw was
All
I think our team
Dominic.
didn't give me the latest kind of program. So I'm sorry, Dominic. The ball is in your court. Please introduce yourself.
All good. Yes, so my name is Dominic. I'm working as well for Carbon Standards, and I'm kind of a tandem together with Matthias, because we cover like the entire circle and ecosystem that a standard owner, developer, and a registry provider kind of offers, from the standard side into the registry side. And depending on the topic, we are a little bit planning and changing who is speaking in the presentation and who will only be part in the Q&A session. So I will start. I hope you can see my screen. Please tell me if you can see it.
Yes.
Good, good. So as Carbon Standards, we want to be and create the most reliable and innovative frameworks to empower partners and individuals to cooling down the planet. So our goal is to provide standards tools so that everyone can work in it, has the trust, and the reliability that if, like Google, buys a credit, it holds what it promises. And that's what we're aiming for, and that's what we're working every day. To give you a little bit of background, what we offer when it comes to biochar and carbon standards, our origin was always with biochar. I think when a standard, a certification scheme is more prominent and well known than the standard itself, which is with our certificate, which is the leading certification scheme when it comes to the quality aspect of the physical biochar, which is in the market since over 12 years, I think we achieved a very good job. As the EBC is mostly based on European laws, we published like 2 years ago a sister twin, the World Biochar Certificate, which relies more or is more addressed to the rest of the world outside of Europe, where we have a little bit more freedom when it comes to certain aspects, when it comes to thresholds and limits, than when we are bound to kind of European laws. Since roughly 5 years, we also deal with ceasing standards, so when it comes to carbon credits. And with our industrial scale certification scheme, the Biochar Sync, and formerly known as EBC Sync, we were like one of the first standards out there when it comes to certifying credits. When it comes to industrial scale produced biochar, we realized like 3 years ago that the classic approach, which comes with industrial scale production, does not fit for most of the global south when we talk about what's this topic today, the smallholder farmer. So we thought ourselves, okay, how can we bring smallholder farmers on this table of CDRs? How can they be a part of the climate change and help us to reduce the CO2 in the atmosphere? And so we created the artisan C-Sync. We also have, when it comes to agroforestry, a separate standard, but today we're talking about biochar, and so we leave it to that. As a standard, a registry provider, we also need tools to make the life and scalability of certification fast and secure. We need a registry, the global C-Sync. We have different tools to help support different questions along the way. For example, methane emissions and compensation is a huge topic recently, and for us, it always was. And now let's dive into the global artisan C-Sync standard, because that's the topic. How can we bring smallholder farmers into a concept that benefit all of them so they can use their own crop residues and not relying on big industrial scale system, which has high capex and opex costs.
Hi, Dominic.
Okay.
I guess,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
we're not
I
able to
realized
see the slides move, Dominic.
Yeah, I think my system just crashed.
Okay, I guess you could just talk, and maybe we've got
Yeah.
5 more minutes, 3 more minutes, in fact, for your presentation.
Good. So in a global artisan C-Sync, we have 3 categories. Because when we talk about smaller farmers, there are different ways of how to group them together. I mean, an easy way of producing biochar are cook stoves, teload systems, where most of you know already from kind of avoidance reductions projects, but they also produce very good quality of biochar. So it makes sense that also these cook stoves could be a way to produce biochar to bring farmers into this market. The classic case, though, is smallholder farmers producing their own biochar with simplified decentralized technology like a contiki, a soil pit. So meaning they use their own crop residues from the harvest of maize, wheat, and so on to produce on-site directly their own biochar. They mix it together with compost manure and apply it directly back into the field. So circular economy locally at its best. But maybe there's also someone that wants to group several farmers together, bring biomass from different farmers together, and want to produce more. So as in case of Baraha, we have Artisan Pros, which is a more collaborative, decentralized aspects, how to group together and bring more biomass to be a little bit more efficient when it comes to time and output of biochar. But the overall aim is always the one that is producing should directly use it on site as close as possible to reduce additional CO2 emission as fast as possible. And when we talk about certification, it's always the question, okay, how can we group them together? How can we build a system, a framework around it so that not each single farmer needs to be audited by a third party every year? And that's why we created the C-Sync manager as kind of a responsible intermediate layer that fulfills specific roles, not only about training how to use the technology to produce biochar, but also how to apply it best, how to mix it with nutrients like compost or manure to bring the best of the benefits of the biochar back into the soil where they grow their crops and food. And last but not least, they do internal inspection, as they are like the first safeguards that people respect the guidelines, the standards, how they have to produce, what data they have to track. It allows us and our and our certifier to kind of audit kind of the work of the seasoned manager, of the staff, of the internal inspection on site as well when they do internal inspection, to give us enough security and assurance that we don't need to look at every single smallholder farmer, which kind of reduces costs of certification, time needed, and scalability is huge. I mean, when you think about India, with millions of smallholder farmers that can be kind of grouped together, be in a system, produce their own biochar, have all these benefits when it comes to agriculture, of these regenerative agriculture approaches, then it's kind of the best way how biochar can be produced with all its side benefits. And digitalization is a huge topic, because if we rely on old school Excel sheets, kind of Word documents, printing, and so on, we will never be able to scale. That's why from the beginning with our registry, we wanted to be digital. We wanted to have API connection. We wanted to be connected with dMRV providers like Varaha, so that they can send kind of instantly, when they have to prove that the biochar is applied, the data to us, which then gets verified directly in our system within days and not months or years, which also helps kind of the scalability to get to the numbers and volumes needed, but also to reduce the cost for every single one. And so I'm happy that we have the opportunity to work together with the World Bank to bring this huge and important topic, how smallholder farmers can benefit from carbon credits, can benefit from biochar, into this series, and happy to be in a panel with my colleague Matthias afterwards.
Thanks a lot, Dominic and Matthias both. I think it's a very important topic, and I think the standards, the measurement tools, all are going to add to the framework which leads to that. Just to let everyone know that there are a lot of questions. All webinars, today's presentations, recording, everyone will be available to all the registered participants. In addition, all the 102 webinars are available on YouTube. There's a whole series. So if you want to see all the 102 webinars, they're all publicly available to YouTube on everyone's. And the link has been put by Sunil in the chat. So please don't feel it's a completely an open access knowledge platform. There's no restriction to that. And we have 12,000 people on this platform, but people who registered today will get the recordings immediately in a short period. So please concentrate on asking questions. And I will also request the panelists to answer some questions, because the number is so huge that in Q&A we'll be able to only take a cluster of questions there. So I have great pleasure in now introducing our colleague Yashika Malik, who works on a lot of these programs with our carbon team. Yashika, over to you. And we are running a little bit short, so if you can do 5 minutes, it'll be great. Over to you, Yashika.
Thank you, Parmesh. I'll try to limit myself under 5 minutes. We'll take it as a challenge. But for everyone, my name is Yashika Malik. I'm a climate change specialist based out of New Delhi office of the World Bank. And we support the government of India on various aspects of mainstreaming climate action, not into just World Bank operations, but also helping India achieve its climate commitments. As most of you would know, that India has committed to a net zero target by 2070. In terms of agricultural emissions, it is less than the global average. So emissions from agriculture are around 14%, but there are other challenges like productivity, crop yield, the vulnerability to the impacts of climate change, the high risk profile in most areas, whether you look at the coastal states, whether you look at the Indian Himalayan states, or the plateau in India. So highly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. We are supporting the government of India in establishing the Indian carbon market by providing infrastructure support and as a knowledge partner. And a couple of weeks back, they had an international workshop there. The idea is to set up like a compliance market, the Indian carbon market, starting with some of the industrial sectors that were earlier part of the Perform Achieve trade scheme, which focused on energy efficiency, but also they've recently added carbon offset mechanism, which sort of create some space for other sectors such as agroforestry, agriculture, forestry, water related sectors for trading. And India has been quite active, as most of the people here have indicated, especially Madhur, about in the voluntary market space as well. And the Ministry of Agriculture has been quite active. They came out with a framework for accessing the voluntary carbon markets for the agriculture sector in India. Now, how looking at the challenges highlighted by Madhur, Olivia, Dominic, really, and potential solutions. I think to maximize the impact of biochar related credits or transitioning into more, climate resilient agriculture, we need policies. So which is what we are doing with the government of India. We also need to sort of incentivize farmers because a lot of these have high, cost initially. So can we bring in some subsidies? Can we incentivize farmer by providing more training? Because that's one of the questions that someone had put out in the chat as well, that how can, we can increase participation of farmers and also establish like carbon market platforms, which sort of aggregate the demand, bring in private sector participation. And one example is the UP Agriculture Project. So through the UP Agriculture Project, we are helping government of Uttar Pradesh establish a Center for Climate Resilient Agriculture Systems, where they want to establish like a carbon management platform, which will serve as a end-to-end service provider, bring in potential buyers, bring in project developers, create ecosystem for digital MRV, build capacity of all the stakeholders, including government, farmers. So we're trying to help and just to give you an idea, if Uttar Pradesh was a country, then it would be the 5th largest country in the world. So as Madhur mentioned, the scale of this of these interventions is huge, and 50% of people in Uttar Pradesh are engaged in agricultural activities. And another challenge that the biochar related carbon credits can help solve in India is also the air quality issue because of the stubble burning that happens. So it can help with crop residue management, which could be like a co-benefit or actually one of the main benefits there. It also can help in drought resilience because some of the areas in Uttar Pradesh, specifically the Bundelkhand region, is prone to droughts, has lower productivity. So biochar related interventions can also help in reducing those vulnerabilities in some of these areas. And in some of the areas can also reduce wildfire risk. I think one of the questions in the chat was also around, can certain types of waste be used? And definitely the twigs and all around the forest areas can be used for biochar. I'll probably stop there and we can have some follow-up discussion.
Thanks a lot, Yashika, and mentioning the UP, because I think in the future projects which we are going to do, this is going to become a big feature of doing large proof of concepts in particularly Indian states where we are going to do new projects there. So I think the potential to collaborate will be quite high as we go forward. And last but not the least, my colleague Mythik is going to also come in. She, at the global level, she works on the whole climate change agenda, but also specifically on number of these initiatives she's part of. So Mythik, over to you.
Thank you very much, colleagues. A lot has been said, so I'll try to add as much value as possible. Also building off of what my colleague Yashika just mentioned earlier, sitting in the global unit, we are working, collaborating with different regional teams to really build out this approach of supporting digital carbon management platform, specifically for agriculture, right? So how we can design a generalized approach for leveraging these kinds of digital platforms within the context of our operations to really capitalize on opportunities for carbon financing by enabling these kind of aggregation of farmers, streamlining the carbon project development process, and also facilitating direct payment to farmers. So really, we see that this UP example that was highlighted as an important pilot for us and learning for us that we can also expand to other regions and other bank operations. On the topic today, I think a lot has been said, and if I can step a little bit, take a few steps back to talk a bit about the challenges and the barriers on biochar briefly, and kind of contextualize a bit on how what we have discussed today provides a lot of learnings and solutions for how we may go forward. So I think, as has been said, a lot of the biochar projects do involve high upfront investment costs, especially when investing in these specialized equipments for the pyrolysis and sourcing of feedstock and other kind of operational expenses. Also on the technical complexity, it does demand some precise control for the pyrolysis conditions and also consistent monitoring, to ensure that the product quality requirements are met. And also, as mentioned, I think by Madhur, it requires knowledge and training on proper application of biochar, and also some behavioral change sort of elements would be needed. And finally, on some kind of operational related challenges around, sourcing adequate biomass feedstock and, transportation to facilities and so on. So perhaps these are some areas that, are challenges that, we can see how the examples from Varaha and others are really showing opportunities for really scaling the solution. So for me, really, the partnership that was discussed today across Varaha, Artimeter, and Google is a really interesting one. For example, on the supply side financing that was mentioned by Artimeter on how the project financing, upfront project financing is quite critical, and also, achievable through, the underlying physical assets that the kind of supply side financier can lend against. And also how the biochar, does provide for different revenue streams in addition to the carbon financing that makes it really diversifying the business model and increasing the viability. And from the buyer side, this idea about, for example, we heard from Google on committing kind of this firm capital for innovative project developers like Varaha to really catalyze the market is a really great kind of opportunity for broader market development. And this example, and also the other growing number of multi-year offtake agreements on biochar that we're seeing in the market is a great demand signal for encouraging further investment. And also another example, I think, just from Colombia, where we saw a leading coffee commodities and supplier firm, Bold Cafe, partnering with a project developer there to generate carbon credits from its own supply chains, involving farmers that are integrated within its own value chain and supply chain, is also a great example that we could learn from, not only contributing to the climate and environmental outcomes, but also for the resilience of the coffee producers that these kind of large agricultural firms work with. So these are really great, case studies of viable and scalable models that for us, I think as a bank, we will kind of distill the learnings and explore how we can, introduce these within our own programs. So maybe I stop there in the interest of time and hand over to you, Parmesh. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Mithik, for giving an overall perspective. I think clearly, I think it's a growth area for us. And the thing is, the interest on this topic is unbelievable. 800 registrations, 277 peaking, 215 still staying. This retention rate is around 75%, which is one of the highest I have seen on any webinar. This means people are still keen to learn. And you can see the chat traffic is very heavy. But what I will do is that I'll raise one question, and then Shweta, who is the orchestrator of this event, will pick the key questions and will pose one question each to each one of you. And then we will try to finish in time to respect our colleagues at India and the people who are joining from all parts of the world. We just don't want to exploit people really spending time with us. So my question is clearly a very simple question. What should the World Bank do to accentuate this biochar on a larger scale? What should be the role of World Bank in doing that? Clearly, we are trying to build this as part of our investment portfolio. But if you think of anything else which comes from your perspective, please give your perspective on that. So that's the question I want to ask everyone to answer. And then over to you, Shweta, to have specific questions on topics for each one of you. But whatever you want to decide, you are now the moderator for the remaining part.
Thank you, Parmesh, and what an exciting discussion and brilliant questions from all over the world. I can easily count more than 100 and 120 questions. A large number of questions directed to you, man on mission, Varaha team. So there are several ones on the cost benefit investment. If you can give a very, very short capsule as to what the cost benefit and investment seen for setting up biochar in a developing country, in this case in India, looks like in USD, that would be great. Of course, there are a large number of questions on, why not composting, why not enhanced rock weathering, why only biochar, why not ash on the field. So people are getting creative here, but we will park the agri-science question. Let's get into the economics of it. So the cost benefit investment for you, Madhur. For Olivia, I'll just, give each one of you your questions and then you can go around and respond to it. To Olivia, actually, there are a number of things on demand and supply. So a large number of participants are confident that supply will be huge once this takes off. And once people are educated, the supply will be great, but can the demand meet the supply, expectations of the supply, and can have an impact at scale? For example, can the market absorb a significant scaling of biochar credits if it reaches like 100 million biochar credits? Can the market take it at a reasonable price or not? To Dominic, well, there are some questions on, are we measuring additional effort, investment, and dilution of farmers and their time in order to participate in these kind of efforts or not? So do the standards also have this sort of a measuring pattern? And from my side, Dominic, digital is moving very, very fast. We can have almost near real-time monitoring. Can we have near real-time accreditation and payout? So that's the question. And to the Google team, to really, there are a large number of questions. But one on the naughtier side is, what price do you commit to pay for biochar credits by 2030? So there is a very specific one on price point. If you want to take that up, if you're not comfortable, that's okay. And where does Google see the use of biochar scaling most quickly? Do you see it more on the larger scale commercial farms or on the smallholder farms in the richer countries or the poorer ones? So how are you going about your strategy? So I'll just pause here and pass it on to each one of you so you can answer your specific question from the audience and also question from the chair of the session, Parmesh. Over to Madhur first.
Okay, thanks, Shweta. So I'll try to cover in as short a time as possible. See, I think I'll talk from a venture approach perspective and how Varaha tackled the entire investment scale up and the economics part of it. So once you start a company, you can't directly go to Google or the big tech saying that we need like $1 million or an offtake contract because we want to do XYZ, right? So you need to showcase a team, you need to showcase partnership, biomass, and some proof of concept on the ground at a decent scale. And so you need capital to do that. And so when you start, the initial investment usually comes from risk takers or grant organizations if you're a non-profit, or mainly from venture funds if you're a for-profit. So we are set up as a for-profit entity. And so the likes of Artimeter here, for example, was a participant in one of the venture rounds that we raised last year, right? And that kind of capital, that high risk capital, allows you to put skills, people together on the ground and execute, right? And once you start to execute at a certain frequency and show a scale up over a period of time, then comes the second part of the investment, which is how do you really scale it up to a level wherein it becomes a meaningful climate solution. And for me, a meaningful is something which gets to at least 10 million over a period of time, like globally, right? Meaningful is not something which is 100,000, a million. And so to get there, you require then investment in terms of putting into reactors or maybe hundreds and thousands of kilns on the ground, right? And this is where you need more investment. And this is where you need multi-model partnership to actually bring together an investment. And at this stage, wherein you have showcased some proof of concept at a decent scale, you can go to the likes of Google.
Sorry to interrupt, Madhur. Some hard numbers.
Yeah, so see, I mean, I won't be able to comment on Google deal or Archimedes participation on our cap table. But I mean, just to give examples, to scale up, you need basically a large offtake contract, which is bankable enough, against which the likes of Archimedes can then also do project financing, right? So for example, if you go to NABARD and ask for green lending facility, they will ask you whether do you have an offtake in place or not. So over a period of time, how you raise investment can change. And now coming to the specific number, to set up each of these facilities that I showcased on the high-tech side, it costs around $1.1 million US dollars in terms of capex, and another $300,000 in terms of working capital to procure biomass before the credits come out, and then you repeat that cycle, right? So basically, for each of the facility to be set up, you require $1.4 million in capex, which can sequester basically 8 to 10,000 tons of carbon dioxide per annum, create 4,000 tons of biochar, and then also generate like lots of green electricity, right? So there are 3 revenue streams through which you are able to diversify these plants. Similarly, on the artisanal side, it's a function of scale, really, right? So how much scale do you want to get to? Capex is not that much, but you require working capital to be able to procure enough biomass to be able to do this at scale. And I think, see, on the economic side, like my view, which is very different from most project developers in the world. So project developers always want to sell at $200, $180, $190. My goal as a mission is to bring the price to double digits, selling price, like by being so efficient and operating at a scale that I can sell at double digits and still make money in the process for everyone, for the investors, for the project developer, and for the farmers. And I want to do that. And our entire team is actually on board with this, because then you don't have just 5 or 10 large buyers in the market. If you get to a 99 or a 98 or a 97 or a $90 over a period of time, then you can bring 500 buyers or 1,000 buyers to the market, buying this and making this a meaningful solution and buying millions of tons a year. Right now, like, I'm happy to make more money by selling it for an expensive price, but it means that it's hard to scale over a period of time as well, and participation remains limited. So I think in terms of investment, it costs $1.5 million to set up large factories. In case of low tech, the advantage is you don't require a lot of capex, but it does require equivalent amount of working capital to be able to sort of turn that around and make money from it. In terms of IRR for an investor, so they can expect an IRR which you can see from a smallholder based, agri-based climate enterprise. So anywhere between $12 to $16. I think these are early days for biochar, so I would say 15 to 16. My goal again on the IRR front is to get to 12 to 13%, which is what solar is funded at in India, right? So de-risk the business so much with multiple revenue streams, and then with so many buyers in the market, that actually someone can put in that capital into the facility at much lower IRR and still make money out of it. So I think these are broader thoughts on how to capitalize the entire market for buyer, supplier, farmer, etc.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Very quickly to Olivia.
I'll just try and be quick here. Supply demand. Look, I repeated some of the numbers before, but the entire voluntary carbon market that had retirements in 2024 was 170 million tons. So absorbing 100 million tons would mean there would have to be a significant, increase of demand. And I think this gets me to the question around what role can the World Bank play. I think all of us in the carbon markets have an expectation that there will be more Rileys in the world. There will be more Googles in the world. There have to be more participants as we stretch toward the 2030 time period, where a lot of net zero commitments are being made, which have implications for carbon buying. The role that the World Bank can play, I think, is partially either providing cheaper forms of capital, lower cost forms of capitals to projects in development in the biochar space, or perhaps better yet, offering a guarantee for investors who are putting capital at risk in these projects. If buyers don't show up in the quantums that we need, there's going to be a lot of facilities that will be created that investors may have a lot of downside exposure to. And I think if the World Bank and others can step in and not necessarily provide capital, we have capital. It's just do the risks meet the return profiles of these projects? And given the question mark about how much demand truly will there be in the market, I think the development finance institutions could play a role by offering a guarantee to investors, such that if you put in, I'll use a round number of $100 million, that you have downside protection, even if the projects don't perform in the way that we expect, because the biochar credit marketplace takes longer to develop that demand cycle that you need from the amount of supply coming online.
That's very clear. Thank you very much, Olivia. A lot of food for thought for our team. Over to you, Dominic.
Yeah. So the question, like how to scale it for a smallholder farmer, I mean, it's digitalization. It cannot be that we rely on paper and pen. It needs to be digital. We need apps to track, to make the system efficient, to reduce working time for everyone. By copy pasting stuff, it needs to be digital with API connection from the smartphone, where a smallholder farmer tracks the production of its biochar and the appliance of the biochar, to an intermediate that validates firsthand kind of if it's plausible or not, which is involved in the project, then through to the registry where third-party verification happens. And this verification needs to happen continuously. So it cannot be that we wait until once a year someone comes on the ground and kind of checks and give the green light for a whole year production. It needs to be continuous. Whenever the proof is there, whenever the biochar is applied, the data is there, there needs to be verification to make the system scalable and fast, to also keep kind of investments and paybacks low, because you can always sell credits on the go.
Thanks, Dominic. Over to you, Lily.
I'm dropping 2 websites in the chat. So I think from our perspective, I think there are a few things to unpack with the conversation on price. The first is, what is the price now versus what is the price in the long term, are 2 very different things. We're trying to catalyze novel technologies. Carbon removal is much more expensive today than what we expect it to be in 2030 and what we expect it to be at scale. And there's a lot of variation. So I don't think indexing on a very specific price for an entire pathway is necessarily the smartest approach, simply because there is a lot of variation in the technologies, there's a lot of variation in the scale potential, there's a lot of variation in the feedstock. And our perspective at Google is we need as many shots on goal right now. And that means that we will be taking a portfolio approach both across carbon removal pathways and within biochar, and within sort of distinct pathways as well. So in the near term, what we focus on is, what is the cost to deliver this technology on what timelines? And then how do you ensure, to Madhur and Olivia's points, that you can provide the return to your investors such that you can continue to scale up and achieve even greater cost downs in the future. So that's what we're focused on. There's no magic number for a price right now. In the long run, the magic number is, Madhur made the great point, it's approaching or below $100 a ton, because the theory is that if you can drop the price sufficiently low and hold the quality bar really high, you can start to achieve, you can bring in more demand, and you can actually bring in more capital to further scale carbon removal. So that's, I think, the theoretical side. But to be very specific about prices that are paid in biochar right now, we're an N of one. We've done 2 biochar deals. So I think we're actually probably not the people to go for and look at price, because we don't have the market insights that a lot of other players do who have evaluated a lot of biochar companies and projects. So I linked to 2 resources. The first is the Puro Cork Index. Like, if you want to know who has good price data on biochar, go to Puro and look at their index that's tracking a lot of their different pricing for a lot of their different corks that they're issuing. So that's one. You're going to get a very robust sample size, and you'll get very good price signaling there. The other is a marketplace called Supercritical that similarly produces or publishes aggregated price data on the projects on their platform. And so that's a report. It's behind a wall, but the report itself is free. But if you look into that report, if you just Google supercritical biochar pricing, you'll be able to find the prices that they list for biochar in their marketplace. And I think that those 2 services, with their sort of their wide swath of the market that they have good data on, are going to be the best starting point for understanding price for biochar. But then it all goes back to what Madhur said, which is driving down costs while maintaining really high quality. That's what makes this scale in the long run.
Great. And any thoughts on the expected role for World Bank?
I mean, I think that it's been covered so far. The biggest one is accessible financing for project developers with return expectations that allow them to crowd in other sources of financing. So I think concessionary capital is the biggest thing that the World Bank could do in the near term. In the longer run, I think it's continuing to host things like this, forums for cracking open the realities of the carbon removal market and making insights around what it takes to build these solutions more accessible and more transparent. I mean, 2 very different answers, but it gets to the financing power of the World Bank and also the convening power of the World Bank, both of which I think are highly important for the market right now.
Thank you very much. And on that note, over to Parmesh for your concluding thoughts.
Thanks a lot, everyone, for such a rich insights into it. I think I personally learned a lot of things about biochar. I think don't understand all the technical aspects fully yet, but I clearly understand the challenges we have. And I think, Olivia, to your question about guarantees, I think our multilateral investment guarantee agency did the first guarantee for conservation programs. Now that's become now the new thing, and I think we'll talk with our finance team and see if we can, because there is appetite now in our guarantee team. We have a specific part of the bank, multilateral investment guarantee agencies. So we could look at really looking at whether we can create a guarantee product out of biochar, which then brings the financing appetite even more to that. And that's one. The second is the concessional finance. That's definitely important, but all our projects, we finance equipment, training, all that. So like Madhur, if he goes to a new place and there is that part of it gets taken care of, how much does the cost come down for growing his business, then he can scale things there. So we will explore that, Madhur, with you, specifically in the new geographies we are going. There's a lot of interest in Kenya on this. You can see people are in the chat asking you a lot about Kenya. The Kenyan government asked me a lot of questions today. So I think Ethiopians are asking me questions. So I think we have a role to play in facilitating your first set of conversations and seeing whether we can bring the kind of gap financing or the concessionary capital there, and then the guarantee part. And clearly knowledge learning is a very important role, I think, which we have a convening power of bringing people together. And I think we have to do this more frequently so that the understanding among various stakeholders and various players in the value chain is the highest. And I think our team, both on the climate side, the digital side, we will definitely have taken note of a lot of things. and we will also come back to you later on to ask for your specific suggestions there. But also appreciate all the people the staying power of people who have stayed till the end. I'm sorry for running about 10 minutes late on this one, but I think we will try to create a kind of smaller community of practice around this issue, because appetite is there, and appetite is across the world. So I think I will charge now Shweta and our climate team to see how we can do this on an ongoing basis. And because we can have an India chapter, we can have an Africa chapter, and then start building that thing. And once these guys go to these geographies, there are people who are there available to help and support these things. The human resource element of building this whole market is also a very critical part of it. So again, good night. It's very late for Madhur. I'm sorry. I apologize for making this. We generally start these things earlier, but because I was in Addis and I was finishing it late, that's why this started late. But normally we start 1 hour earlier on these things. So I apologize to everyone for that. And thanks for all the participants for staying late from all corners. And good afternoon, good evening, and good morning. And thanks to all of you, the panelists, Madhur, Olivia, Raleigh, and Matthias, Dominic, Yashika, and Mithik. And many thanks, Shweta, for taking the pains to pull it all together. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot, everyone. Bye. Take care.
Thank you and bye-bye.
Thank you.